Today I want to talk to you guys about this, the Panasonic Lumix S5. Now in this video I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of the camera itself. I'm not going to dive too much into the spec. There are much better videos on that out there, so I would suggest checking them out if you want all of the detail. However, what I'm going to do in this video is give you a general overview and then give you my thoughts, being both a Panasonic G9 and a GH5 owner. The Lumix S5 looks to be the perfect upgrade for a full frame camera from these models, and what I want to do is give you my thoughts having spent 2 weeks with this new model from Panasonic. Now the first thing we're going to do is take a quick dive and have a quick look over the camera itself and compare it to the other models. Then I'll give you my thoughts at the end of the video. The S5 is the latest model in Panasonic's S series of full frame cameras and has a 24 megapixel sensor. It is cheaper than both the S1 and S1H and is designed to give an easier entry point into the L-mount system. The S5 is the smallest of the full-frame cameras from Panasonic and is actually very similar in shape and size to the GH5 and G9. It weighs 714 grams, making it 56 grams heavier than the G9, but 11 grams lighter than the GH5. Taking a closer look at the spec of the Lumix S5, it features a 24.2 megapixel full-frame sensor with dual native ISO. It has 14 plus stops of dynamic range, dual onboard IBIS like the GH5, and also includes Vlog as standard. Looking at the onboard recording options, you have Ultra HD 8-bit up to 30 frames a second unlimited at full sensor, or you have 4K 60 frames a second 420 10-bit with a sensor crop and a 30-minute recording limit. There are also a wide range of other modes available, and you can also record 10-bit output via the HDMI Unlimited as well. Alongside the two options I've mentioned, there are a whole host of other recording modes available, and newshooter.com has a nice chart that lays out which ones are limited with a star next to them and which ones are cropped. So it is worth checking this out, and I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. Just like the GH5 and G9, it features a 3-inch fully articulating rear screen that allows you to point it backwards as well as forwards, and it also has a 2.36 million OLED viewfinder. Looking around the controls, if you've used a Lumix camera before, it will feel very familiar with the D-pad on the back, the Q button, the display, the back, and the focus joystick. You also have a built-in power switch on this integrated into the main selection knob, just like on the GH5. On the front you have a nice large grip where you have your lens release button as well as a programmable button located within easy reach. Looking closer at the controls on the top, you have your main selection dial with all of the usual modes on, including movie mode and S&Q for slow motion. You then have a dedicated video recording button, white balance, ISO and exposure compensation button, and there are two dedicated control dials for changing settings, one located around the shutter button on the front and one at the back, allowing you to change things such as your exposure, your shutter speed, depending on what you've set these to. Looking on the other side of the body, you also have a dedicated dial for high-speed shooting and timer modes that are available on the camera. A nice feature on the S5 is in the middle of the main focus control switch, there is also a dedicated focus mode button that allows you to select the mode quickly without having to go into the quick menu and try to find the focus option you need. There's also a dedicated AF button, and you still have that Q button, but the focus options have been moved out into their own separate menu. Moving around the body, on the right hand side we have a remote input, and you also here have your dual SD and SDXC card slots, allowing for both dual recording, so backing up your footage to both cards at the same time, or recording to one and the other for doubling your storage. Looking on the right hand side, you have a number of flaps which contain a mic input, headphones output, as well as micro HDMI output and the USB-C that allows for both powering the camera and charging it while in use. Moving around to the bottom, you will find the usual tripod input in the middle, as well as a grip connector port on the left-hand side. Under the battery bay door, you will find an all-new 7.2 volt 220 mAh battery. This pack is backwards compatible with the GH5 and G9, however you cannot use GH5 and G9 batteries in the S5. Now, with regards to the battery life itself, Panasonic state that this will power the camera for up to 440 stills with the rear viewfinder, 470 stills with the LVF, and up to 1500 stills in power saver mode with the LVF. They are also saying you can get up to 110 minutes runtime in MPEG-4 4K 60 frames a second too. Now, looking at the menus on the S5, it is very similar to previous models from Panasonic. Everything is easy to find and nicely laid out with custom options available too. Compared to, say, something like a Sony, you will find that everything is labelled as you would expect it to be within easy reach, and you can add things into custom sections in the menu to get access to them quicker if you need to as well. Now, this kit I was sent included the 24-105 f4 lens. This is not the same lens that is included with the main kit that you get with the S5 for just under £2,000. Now, this is a very nice lens, but it is a large lens. As you can see, compared to the camera, it is quite a big piece of glass overall. Now, it has its zoom controls on the side, and like many of the other Panasonic's lenses, it is tromboning. However, that really doesn't bother me. Now, it has a nice built-in and extremely smooth focus control, but it is a digital focus control like we find on other Panasonic lenses. On the side, there are a number of switches and locks as well. It has a lock, an AF and manual focus switch, as well as an image stabilization switch too. Overall, as you can see, whilst the body of the S5 is very similar to the G9, the lens is what makes it much larger overall, and that's really where the increased size and weight comes from with this camera. However, that kit lens that I mentioned I wasn't sent is quite a bit smaller, and that does bring the overall size and weight down as well. So, to give you my thoughts on the Lumix S5, now I'm going to break this down into several sections. I'm going to talk about stills, video, and then I'm going to give you my final thoughts on the camera itself. Now, talking about stills first of all, compared to the G9 specifically, the S5 does come in as a heavier camera overall, and whilst the body of the S5 is similar in shape and size to the G9, the weight of the L-mount lens system is certainly noticeable. That is both a benefit and a downside. The benefit for me is it gives a lot more stability in the hand when you're holding the camera, and it just feels a lot better to use. However, the downside obviously is that you are carrying that extra weight. One of the big benefits of the MFT lens system is the fact that you can get long focal lengths with smaller lenses. With the L mount system though, you are moving more towards that larger lens like we're used to seeing on the Sonys and Canons. Now, in use, the camera does feel reassuringly heavy, and what I mean by that is the shutter has a nice heavy clunk to it, especially compared to the G9, and the overall ergonomics of the camera are very good. It is heavy, but it doesn't feel overly heavy, and I've certainly not had any hand ache or anything like that compared to the other models. Now, ergonomics wise, overall everything is easy to reach and you don't have too much difficulty finding things. White balance, ISO, as well as the other settings are all easy to find, and it is nice that you've got a dedicated button for the autofocus functions rather than having just to go into the Q menu system and change it that way. It also has that similar switch like we've seen on the GH5 as well for changing between continuous or single autofocus, and then you've got the button for selecting the autofocus mode located in the middle. Now, from a viewfinder and screen point of view, for me as an amateur photographer, it's good enough. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's the best in the world or the worst in the world. It does what I expect it to do, and that's pretty much all I would ask from it. Now, with regards to the autofocus in stills on the S5, it does a decent job. The human and the animal detection seems to work fine, although I have found in pinpoint mode or the normal focus mode, it does miss at times, and when I was taking images of smaller items like leaves and berries on trees, it was struggling to actually lock onto them, and I was having to move into manual focus to get it to do it. Now, I don't know if this has been improved with the new firmware that has been released this week, but overall the focus system is as good as the G9. I can't really say if it's any better or worse. As a Panasonic user, I'm certainly not disappointed in it. I'm just not blown away by the improvements either. One last thing I wanted to mention on stills is the shutter release button on the S5. It is dramatically improved compared to the G9. The button on the G9 is frankly terrible. It is far too soft and far too easy to fire off. On the S5, it is weighty and it feels good, and it just feels like the shutter button should feel. It's nice and easy to press for the autofocus, and then you've got a nice resistive hard press to actually fire that shutter off. Now, moving over to video on the S5. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into this. I could talk about video for hours. I'm going to give you my thoughts being someone who uses the GH5 and a Sony and the G9 daily. What I will say is this: the S5 has all of the features except one that I use daily. I don't use probably 50% of the pro level features that are on the GH5, but the ones I do use are on the S5 apart from shutter angle. However, it isn't really a big deal for me, and Panasonic have said that it will be coming in later firmware. Now overall, it has a wide range of in-body recording options. Some of them don't always show up and you've got to make sure that you're in the right recording format. For instance, Movie has more recording options than MPEG 4, but everything is there that I use. It has 4K 60 frames a second up to 10-bit, and that is as good as I will ever need. However, just like the GH5, if I did want more options from in-body, I would then simply move over to the HDMI output and use something like an Atmos. Now, another nice feature about the S5 is the fact that they include that Vlog as standard, and that was a paid upgrade on the GH5, and whilst it isn't something I used, it is nice that it is included either out the box and it isn't something that you have to pay for. Now, as I've mentioned, it has all of the important stuff I looked for when I was buying this camera. It has the dual SD card slots, it has the individual recording buttons, nice and easy to use autofocus in, and it just has all of the basic features that I need to be able to get my content done. I would say some of the downsides to this camera compared to the GH5, really the biggest one is weight. It is a bigger animal overall, and again, as I've already mentioned, that is to do with the lenses more than the camera body itself. Now, with regards to video recording quality, it is an improvement over the GH5, simply due to the fact that you do have that full frame sensor and you have that increased dynamic range. If you're a GH5 or G9 user, you will certainly be happy with the video output from this camera. Finally, talking about autofocus performance in video. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't something I use a lot, but I did do some tests with the S5, the GH5 and the G9, all on identical settings, and I tried to set them to similar focal lengths as well. Here you will see how the autofocus behaved with me outdoors, just moving around in and out of frame. At times, I found the S5 did lag behind the other cameras, but it also held a little bit better as well, so it isn't as reactive as the other cameras to sort of switch on and off between fast moving things in and out of the frame. Now, this is with all of the standard settings. I haven't made any changes, and you can tweak the settings on the S5 to be better or faster, and that wasn't something I did. I just wanted to demonstrate how it behaved out of the box for me. I really can't say hand on heart that I've seen any real improvements in the autofocus compared to the other models, but I am not using it in video all of the time. I didn't get a chance to try it too much in the studio environment. For me, it isn't something I would rely upon in video. I would use it if I had to, but overall, it's not terrible. It just doesn't feel massively better than what we've seen from the other two models. Okay, so to give you my final thoughts on the S5, now I have to say I have fallen in love with this camera a little bit. For me, it is absolutely the natural upgrade from both the GH5 and the G9. If you're looking for a hybrid camera that will do both video and stills every day of the week, the S5 just seems a natural fit. From a stills point of view, yes, it is bigger than the G9 and it is heavier, but that extra weight does bring some benefits. From a video point of view, it has all of the important features that I need in a camera, whilst it still has the improvements in stills. You do have that increased dynamic range and you get the benefits that you have from using a full frame sensor. Now, whilst this camera has a hell of a lot to like, there are one or two downsides, and those downsides for me is actually the L-mount lens system. Panasonic sent this to me with the 24-105, and this is an extremely nice lens. However, the downside to this is the price. It is a £1,300 lens, and if you compare that to the pricing on many of the MFT lenses, it's almost twice the cost. So whilst I do love this camera, the one bit that is holding me back is the cost of the L-mount system and the fact that there are not as many lenses out there compared to MFT at the moment. I record most of my content on the f2.8 12-60, which is on this one now, and I also have the 35-100 and a couple of other lenses on MFT as well. On the L-mount, there is a bit of a gap there at the moment, and not every lens that I would want is available, or certainly available within the price range. Now, I didn't get to try this camera on the kit lens lens that they include. They did send me this one, and I'd be really interested in seeing how that one is too. Overall, I have to say I would replace both the GH5 and G9 with this camera tomorrow if I had the money. It's the lens system that is holding me back more than anything. Panasonic are increasing the amount of L-mount lenses, and they've got their new range of primes that are available now shortly too. However, here and now today, there aren't as many options out there as I'm used to having on MFT. Overall though, I have to say I really do love this camera. It is going to be very hard for me not to run out and buy this combo. The only thing that's really stopping me is not actually having the money to do it. However, if I did, I can tell you now that I certainly would do it. And that is it for this video. If you found it useful, please do hit the subscribe button. Also, please do put in the comments what you think about this camera. I'd be really interested for both GH5, G9 and other Panasonic users to tell me what you think it's actually like. There are a lot of benefits, but there are some downsides too, so I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I will do another one soon.